Okay, the next thing we're going to look at is the statistics calculations that we were learning in this class. So number 24 says calculate the percent of surveyed students. So surveyed students is 456. So we would take 456 and divide that into the number of sophomores that prefer chocolate ice cream. So sophomores that prefer chocolate ice cream is 75. I'm going to take my calculator and I'm going to divide 75 by 456 and I get 0.164, so that's about 16.4%. And then number 25 says a similar question, but this time instead of the population being all the surveyed students, it says given the student is a junior, so that means these 115 juniors is who the big group is. The small group is those that prefer vanilla ice cream. So there are 59 of those. So I'm going to divide 59 by 115 and I get about 51.3%. Now then question 26 says, using the above scenario as an example, write an appropriate big ideas answer to the essential question, how can we compare the choices of two different groups? Well, we can compare the choices of different groups by making a two-way table and calculating these numbers here, especially that one right there, are called relative frequencies. They give us an idea of what each of the groups prefer. In this way, we will know what percentage of people, of juniors, prefer chocolate compared to seniors, etc. That's a good answer. 27 and 28 have to do with these two sets of numbers from Team Alpha and Team Epsilon. So I could do these by hand, but it would be better if I actually use the calculator because it's going to be faster and I won't have to worry about making some silly arithmetic mistake. So this is 26 and 28, and I'm going to have information about Team Alpha and Team Epsilon. So if I'm going to use the calculator, I can use it to find the mean, the median, and in the case of 28, this is 27. In the case of 28, the range and the IQR. The IQR stands for the interquartile range. So the first thing I have to do is I have to put the data in the calculator. So I press the stat button and the edit is going to take me right to the lists. Now I've gone ahead and put them in here, but you just got to type those in, and that's Team Alpha, and here's Team Epsilon, and there's 10 pieces of data. You want to make sure those numbers are right, because if those numbers aren't right, you're not going to get anything right. Garbage in, garbage out. So the next job is to push the stat button again, and this time I'm going to go over to the calc menu and pick the first choice, which is one variable statistics. Now I'd like this to be L1 because I'd like to do Team Alpha first. And I'm going to hit calculate. The mean is this thing called the X bar, so Team Alpha's mean is 25.1. Now also on here, if I go down far enough, down here they tell us the median. The median is 25. Those are pretty close to each other. But since I'm here, I might as well get the range in the IQR. The range is the maximum minus the minimum, so that would be 33 minus 20, so that would be 13. The IQR is Q3 minus Q1, which in this case is 8. Okay, now that's all I need from team alpha. Time to go do team epsilon. So I push the stat button again, go to the calc button again, hit the first choice again, but now I need it to say L2. And to make it say L2, you'll see it's printed on my calculator right there, which that's the blue button, which is the second button, and I'm typing in L2. So now it says L2, so it'll do team epsilon. And team epsilon's mean is 26.7. Their median is 29. The range is 34 minus 15, which I believe is 19. And their IQR is 32 minus 20, which is 12. So now the other part of the question said to compare them. So for 27, we notice that the mean and the median for team alpha are actually lower than the mean and the median for epsilon. So team epsilon has higher average scores. Now for 28, we're going to compare the range and the IQR. Well, team epsilon has a higher range in IQR. Remember that those are measures of spread. So that means that team epsilon has scores that are more spread out. Okay, and that gets us through question 28. Now, the rest of these go pretty quick. 29 says, select all data sets that appear to be skew right. Now, skew right means that it points to the right, and that would be A. The bump is on the left, but the skew right means that it's pulled this direction by data that's an outlier. So this one's not skew right. This one's not skew at all, but this one's also skew right. So the answer here is A and D. Now, describe the correlation of this data set. Well, if I were to draw a straight line in here that represented the line of best fit, it would go somewhere right in here. And that line would be a positive line, a positive slope. So it's what we call a positive correlation. So you got two positive correlations here. Now, a strong positive correlation would be right next to the line almost all the way. A weak correlation means that they're not nearly as grouped together as they could be about that line. So in this case, it's a weak positive correlation. I've got one more statistics question, and this has to do with what's known as the residual. And to calculate the residual is always y minus y hat. Y hat is the predicted value. Y is the actual value. So here we've got actual values, and the predicted value would be attained by calculating it through this equation, because it says that's the regression equation. So if I look at 8 is, and I don't like 8 because it's going to work out the wrong way. I'm going to put in 8 for x, and let's see what the predicted, that's the y hat, it's going to be. My y hat is going to be 1.6 times 8 plus 31.2. So I'm putting that in my calculator just to make it easier. 1.6 times 8 plus 31.2 gets me exactly 44. So in this case, it's going to be this 44, which is the actual one, minus that 44, which is the predicted one, and it gets me 0. And the reason I don't like this is because I could get these confused and still get the right answer. Okay, on number 32, it says select the equivalent expression written as a radical. Now we notice on this one, it's 32 to the 3/5. This is what's known as a rational exponent. And I've often said with a tree looks like this. Here's the ground, tree grows above, and this is where the power is up on the top. And on the bottom, that's where the roots are, and so this is a power, and this is the root. So the root is 5, so it's going to be 32, and we put a 5 here, and then it's to the third, that's the power. And now the 33 says to calculate the simplified form of that expression. So root 75 has a perfect square as a factor. And so we're going to end up with a 3 here, so that has to be 25. So this is going to be 5 root 3 minus 2 root 3. Well, that's 5 minus 2 is 3 root 3 is the answer. There's several different ways to multiply this. One is FOIL. If you know FOIL and you like it, you can use it. I'm going to use the box because that's one thing I'm sure everybody will understand. I'm going to put 3x minus 2 up here and 2x plus 5 here. So multiplying that, I get 6x squared. Then I get negative 4x. This is going to get me 15x. And negative 2 times 5 is negative 10. Well, 6x squared is good. The negative 10 is good. But these two are like terms, so they will combine. 15x minus 4x is 11x minus 10. And there's my answer. Factored form. Well, this is the difference of 2 squared, so it couldn't be much easier. We know this has to be x, that has to be x, that has to be 8, that has to be 8, one has to be minus, the other has to be plus. Now, if I were to multiply those together, the middle terms would fall out because I'd get a negative 8x and a positive 8x, and that's 0, so they drop out. But I'm still going to get a negative 64 on this end and an x squared on this end, so we know it's right. That's all right. Okay, factored form on this one. I could use the box, but I don't really need it. I know that has to be x and that has to be x, and one has to be negative and one has to be positive because they multiply to be a negative. So I need two numbers that have a difference of 1, but they multiply to get me 20. So it's got to be 4 and 5. The 5 has to be the positive because it came out to be a positive. So that's my answer. Write a function that represents this function after translation 3 units to the left and 1 unit down. So if I think of this in terms of vertex form says this. And what is going to determine to the left is the h, and what is going to determine down or up is the k. Now the a is already told to us it's negative 4. So it's f of x equals negative 4 times x. And because it's to the left, that would be minus subtracting a negative, which is the same thing as a positive. So that takes care of the left. And then 1 unit down is literally minus 1. And there we go. Okay, 38. State the domain and range. Well, most of us have figured out that the domain has to do with x, and it's all real numbers. However, on the final, it will be written like this, from negative infinity to infinity. So x runs from negative infinity all the way to infinity. The range, on the other hand, has to do with the y's, and in terms of the y-axis, I'm only using this part of it. I'm not using that part at all. So y is less than or equal to 4 is the answer. Now, looking at that same graph, it's increasing until I get to here, and then it's decreasing after that. Now, whenever we talk about intervals, we're asking about the x value. So it's decreasing from here to infinity. So that would be from negative 1 to infinity. So x is greater than negative 1 is the decreasing part. The increasing part starts all the way out there and ends right there. So it is from here that direction. So it is x is less than negative 1. That's the increasing part. X is less than negative 1. Looks like that. Describe the big idea that answers the question, how do the parameters AH and K affect the graph of a quadratic function. So A tells us if the parabola is compressed or stretched vertically. It also tells us, A tells us if it opens up or down. H tells shifts left or right. K shifts up or down. Doesn't really of this is of the quadratic function, and it says f of x equals x squared plus 2x minus 15. So my first job is going to be to factor this. So I know one has to be negative and one has to be positive because that's a negative. And then when I multiplied it, it got a negative. So I need two factors of 15 that are 2 apart. And it's going to be minus 3 and plus 5 because 5x minus 3x is 2x. So I did that. I know I did that right. And now I say x minus 3 equals 0 or x plus 5 equals 0. If this is true, x is 3. If this is true, x is negative 5. So my two answers are 3 and negative 5. 42 says, select the solution. Now there's two ways to solve this. One is to use the quadratic formula, which is a little messy with this problem. The other is to use completing the square. And I'm going to show you completing the square first because I like it the better way. First, I got to get that 7 out of here so I can complete the square because it's not complete the way it's written. Now, the next question is, what number will I add here to make this a perfect square? Well, the perfect square is going to be x plus 6. You just take the 12 and cut it in half. 6 squared is 36. So I have to add a 36 here, and I have to add it there. Now, 36 minus 7 is 29. So now I just got to get x by itself. My first job is to take square root of both sides. I'm going to rewrite this x plus 6 squared equals 29. Now I'm going to take the square root of both sides. I get x plus 6 equals, don't forget to write plus or minus, square root of 29. Last job is to subtract 6. And that's going to get us x is equal to negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 29, which is answer D. And we could also use the quadratic formula to do the same thing. We'd get A equals 1, B equals 12, and C equals 7. X equals the opposite of B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC all over 2A. A is 1, B is 12. C is 7. So we get negative 12 plus or minus the square root of 144 minus 28 all over 2. Finally, that's negative 12 plus or minus the square root of 116 over 2. Now, square root of 116 is not the square root of 29, so we got some more work to do. Specifically, we got to split that into two factors. The first one is 4, the second one is 29. And it's not because I'm a genius that I figured that out. It's because I divided 116 by 4 and got 29. Okay, so I'm going to put a 2 here and a 2 there because that's what I'm doing. I'm distributing the 2. We get a negative 6 plus or minus, well, wait a minute, square root of 4 is 2. So the 2 and the 2 would cancel. We get square root of 29, which that answer is exactly the same as what we got when we completed the square. I like completing the square better. It's a little faster. No fractions to deal with. So this is the last one. Y equals x squared plus 6x plus 5. There's two ways to get this answer. One is by using the formula for the axis of symmetry. If you remember that, it's x equals the opposite of b over 2a. So the other way is to complete the square. I'm going to show you that one too, but we'll do this one first. So A is 1, B is 6. So if I plug those in, I get x equals the opposite of 6 over 2 times 1. Well, that's going to get me -3. So that tells me what the x coordinate is. So now let's get the y coordinate. We're going to plug -3 in here because that'll tell us what y is. So y is equal to -3 squared plus 6 times -3 plus 5. So that's 9 minus 18 plus 5, which is -9 plus 5, which is -4. So the vertex is at -3, -4. And now if I'm going to complete the square instead, the first thing I have to do is get that 5 out of here. So I'm going to subtract it from both sides. I'm going to leave myself a little space here because we're going to be completing things. X squared plus 6x. So all I did was subtract that 5 from both sides, which effectively moves it over here. Now I know I want this to be something squared. It's x plus 3 squared because I cut that 6 in half, I get a 3. 3 squared is 9, so I really got to add a 9 here. But if I'm going to add a 9 here, I have to add a 9 here. And now y minus 5 plus 9 is y plus 4. So y plus 4 is equal to x plus 3 squared. Now I got 2 more steps. The first is to, no, I only got 1 more step. I got to subtract 4 from both sides, and then I'm done. Because I'm going to get y equals x plus 3 quantity squared minus 4. And I know from my practice with the vertex form, the vertex is at -3, -4, which is exactly the same thing that we got the other way. And that's it. I wish you luck. Please study and do well on the test tomorrow.